We're going to call the January 13th, 2020 Board of Selectmen meeting to order. No one has signed up for public comments. Can we all rise and salute the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have a person who is delayed in traffic, so we're going to take a few things out of order, so we just hope that you'll be patient. Can I have a motion to move up item 5B?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is a vote. We are on common victualler license application for Cafe Amore, 385 Southbridge Street. Is the applicant here? Could you please come up and sit with us at the table? How are you this evening?
Not bad, thank you.
Can you just introduce yourself for the record?
My name's Travis Suler.
Can you explain a little what you're intending to do?
Our goal is just to bring a coffee offering to inside of the Auburn Mall.
This is going to be in the food court area?
Yes, it is.
Okay. You met with the DCGIC. You're familiar with their recommendations?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do board members have any comments or questions? Mrs. Goodrich?
I'll just comment that welcome to Auburn.
Thank you.
Needed down in that area there, so we wish you well. I don't see any specific concerns. I know that you'll work closely with the Board of Health to make sure you're in compliance, so I have no issues with this license.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve or deny the license?
I'll make a motion that we approve the license, provide that all applicable requirements of the state and town and any of its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled. Said license is subject to all the conditions stated upon it. Failure to comply with any and all of the conditions shall invalidate the license and render it null and void, and with the conditions stated by the DCG to be placed on the license.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is a vote. It's unanimous. Can we have a motion to move up item 5C, please?
Thank you. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is a vote. We are on recommendations for the special town meeting on January 21st. I seem to have misplaced my item, so... So Article 1 is boilerplate. We don't usually make a recommendation on that. That's just reports. Article 2 is to see if the town meeting will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire by purchase, gift, and/or eminent domain to do with Auburn Street, which we've had some presentations. Do you have anything, Mrs. Jacobson?
Through the chair, I'm all set. If anyone has any questions, just a reminder, Article 2 on the vote for the Auburn Street project, we did send out a letter to town meeting members explaining the importance of this article. Again, we're trying to move this up by one fiscal year per the request of Mass DOT, who's able to take our project a year in advance if we can get the approvals to do the right-of-way takings and easements. Along with that would go an additional $700,000 that would offset the $1.2 million approved by town meeting on the town aspect of this, in addition to the $3.4 million from the state. So we would just ask the board to respectfully support this article. It's very important for this project.
Do board members have questions?
I'll make a motion that we recommend.
A second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, it is a vote. Article 3 is a school committee article asking for a amendment to the May 7th, 2019 town meeting CIP funds. We did get an email about this. This apparently $40,000 is for learning space, and $40,000 is for resurfacing tennis and basketball courts. The reason they're repurposing $40,000, according to the school department, is that the facade at the high school has been completed, and they can apply these funds to some needed renovations for programs. Are there any questions from board members?
I'll make a motion to recommend.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is a vote. And we have Article 4, to see if town meeting will vote to appropriate $55,000 from FEMA 2018 snow reimbursement funds to purchase and install a mobile column heavy-duty lifting system for the fleet maintenance unit of the DPW. Mrs. Jacobson, do you have anything that you want to share?
Through the chair, again, this is a recommendation by the DPW director to utilize the 2018 FEMA reimbursement from the snow. We believe it's an appropriate use for this. It will mean that we don't have to borrow for this replacement of this.
I just asked, just out of sheer curiosity, what is a mobile column heavy-duty lifting system, if nobody knows that?
This is a system that will enable us to lift our heavier fleet vehicles, such as fire trucks. Right now, when we have to do certain work, we're not able to lift them on the current lift system, so it's a larger lift system.
Okay. Any questions from board members? Mr. Lilliberty?
Through the chair, this is still the portable ones that we were shown at the last meeting, right? That'll be moved on.
Mrs. Goodrich?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to comment that, since the town manager has formed the Fleet Maintenance Division, specifically under the direction and leadership of Mr. Coyle, we have saved the residents an incredible amount of money having all of this work done in-house. And I sometimes shake my head and wonder how the DPW does it all with the different divisions under his authority, but they do incredible work, and I think that he should be thanked for that. So I fully support this article.
Is there a motion?
Motion to recommend.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, it is a vote. All right. Now we turn that to you. I see our special guest is here, so I will call up representatives from the Mass Municipal Association, Jeff Beckwith, Jim Boudreau, and Denise Baker. I don't know that we have enough seats for everybody, I'm sorry, but... Good evening. Thank you for coming.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having us. Julie, I've been told I have to read what's on the paper and not have lit like I usually do, so I'll
come on,
do the
that's
best
no
I
fun.
can sticking to my my script. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Through you, my name is Jim Boudreau, and I'm the town administrator in the town of Situate, Massachusetts. Yes, that's the one you see on the news every time there's a big storm. And I'm the current president of the Mass Municipal Managers Association, the MMMA, and I'm here tonight to fill you in and the residents of Auburn on the tremendous accomplishments and work of your town administrator, Julie Jacobson, the day after her birthday. So happy birthday, too.
Thank you.
I won't say.
Yeah, tell it.
Julie's one of the finest managers that I've had the privilege of working with in my 25 years in local government. And just for the record, I started when I was 7. The beard makes me look a little bit older, but I am a little younger than that. She's been a leader here in Auburn and across the Commonwealth, and a shining example of what's right and good in local government. Too often, we as managers don't tell people the good that we're doing outside of our communities and elsewhere. And that's why I'm here tonight, to tell you the recognition and the good work that Julie does, not only in Auburn that you know, but across the state. She's been on the MMMA board since 2014 and a member of the MMA Board of Directors since 2016. In that position, she is frequently called upon to make presentations at the Local Government Advisory Council, consisting of the Lieutenant Governor and members of the Cabinet staff. There are very few managers in this state that can pick up the phone and call the Lieutenant Governor and say, I have a problem, and have the Lieutenant Governor take her call. Julie's one of those managers. The contacts that she makes at those meetings are invaluable to her and the town of Auburn, and she uses them on your behalf. She served on the MMA Cannabis Advisory Board. I am told she has not taken any samples, but she was on that board. That board has served as a role model to devise cannabis regulations and rules all across the state. Her work on that has been invaluable, and it has been tremendously helpful to the cities and towns of this Commonwealth. She's one of the founders and served as chair of the Women Leading Government Committee since its creation in 2018. WLG began with a small group of female managers talking about forming a group to help support and promote women in their career. The first meeting, there were 25 women at the Needham Senior Center. A year later, there was over 100 people in Shrewsbury to listen to Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito and other female leaders. We now have 3 meetings a year and have over 400 members on our email list. This year in February, the WGL conference is sold out. There will be a keynote speaker from the first female president of the Worcester Polytech Institute, and I think the Lieutenant Governor is also coming at Julie's invitation. So that will be a huge event for women leaders all across the Commonwealth, and that is due in no small part to all the work that Julie's done. Through all this, Julie continues to serve as a mentor and a sounding board to members across the state. Men and women alike reach out to her for advice and guidance on their career, their professional life, and how to solve issues facing their communities. She never turns down an opportunity to help people in need. She's one of those people that managers have to have in their career, that when your hair's on fire and you're going to jump out the window because you have no idea what to do, you call Julie, she calms you down, and she gives you a path to get through. I've called her a bunch of times, usually when the water's coming over the seawall, and she just tells me, it'll go back, relax, it'll go back. But that's invaluable, and to show the respect that she has of her peers in the MMA, she has been elected to serve as the next president of the association beginning in 2 weeks at the MMA's annual conference in January. So she will be the next president of the Massachusetts Municipal Managers Association. She will have her hands full cleaning up the mess I've left. I spent all the money, Julie, there's nothing left. So good luck with that, but I wish you the best of luck. But Julie is not only recognized by her peers in Massachusetts. Last summer, the MMA nominated her for the League of Women in Government Leadership Trailblazer Award. And its second year, the award is for women who go into leadership positions in municipal government and go beyond the boundaries of the community to encourage and help move women into other leadership positions. Julie was named a finalist for this award and was honored at the Women's Symposium at the ICMA Annual Conference on October 26, 2019. She has been recognized by her peers as one of the finest female leaders in the country. I would state that she is one of the finest municipal leaders in the country. It is my privilege to be her colleague, and I am proud to be her friend. To that, we're going to present you with this book. I'm covered in glitter. I wish you good luck, and at this point, I will turn it over to the president of the MMA, Jeff Beckwith.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I apologize for timing, the perfect timing. Of course, a small accident 2 miles away from 495 in the Pike delayed me, so I apologize for that very much. At Julie's behest, we started to hold MMA policy committees outside of the city of Boston because we recognize how difficult it is for everyone or anyone to get there. I am here privileged and really honored on behalf of the staff and the board of directors of the MMA. Julie does not like to have people talk about how wonderful she is, but we are doing that. We have some members of the MMA board of directors here. There's Katie McHugh and Denise Baker. We have other members and colleagues of hers as well here. And I just have 3 messages. The first is that we want to say thank you. Thank you to you and all of the government leaders in Auburn who let us take as much of Julie away from you as possible so that she can improve the quality of local government all across Massachusetts. And she's done that in her policy committees and recommendations and being a leader on our board of directors, being a leader in the Local Government Advisory Commission, and representing all of local government on the Cannabis Control Commission Advisory Board in all other possible settings, including testifying at the State House, just working on public policy, working on how government is practiced at its highest and best level to serve the people of Massachusetts. And as Jim Boudreau, who also has been recognized by his peers across Massachusetts, being chosen to be the president of the Triple MA this past year, and and so it's a privilege of his to be able to work with Julie, but I hope that you also recognize that the accolades that are coming from the professionals, the local government professionals who make government work every day as best as possible, all hold Julie in the highest of esteem. So first, Julie is widely recognized as a major contributor to improving and advancing the way local government works and moves forward all across the entire state. And so we appreciate your lending her services to all of us. Second, Julie is amazing to work with because she puts in the time and the effort, and she cares and does her best, but also models the very best. And that's one of the reasons why the Women Leading Government program in Massachusetts, as Jim described so well, has flourished in this state, one of the most successful of the state-based enterprises of its kind. Julie's been the chair from the beginning and is committed to being the best mentor and role model for really hundreds of people in local government, hundreds of women in local government, many of whom are for the first time thinking, well, maybe I could be a town manager too. Maybe I could to take that next step. And she's really encouraging and planting seeds all across the state. There are right now under 25% of the town administrators and town managers in Massachusetts are women. A little over 50% of the people who live in Massachusetts are women. And Julie is helping to move the state forward, to not just have balance, but to make sure that we in local government can make best use of the talents of people in Massachusetts and to have local government itself move forward and represent all of the people and look like all of the people here in Massachusetts. And it's by the not just chairing the committee, but doing the work, encouraging people, and being a magnet that draws people in that's made this program such a success here in Massachusetts. And the third is just about how important quality local government is. You know it. You're here. You're here on a Monday night, devoting hours of your time, and you choose the professionals to lead our local governments all throughout 24 hours a day. And you've chosen Julie, and you work with Julie, and you support Julie, and you give her direction and guidance. And she has in turn modeled to her peers, not just in Massachusetts, but across the country, how to be an ideal public servant. And the award, the recognition that she's received from the Women Leading Government program in ICMA, which is the International City County Management Association, is something that makes all of us proud in Massachusetts. Julie is not just a leader here in your town and in this region or in this state, but in the profession of public management to serve the people. She's recognized as one of the very best in the nation. So the staff, the board, the members of the MMA are just so fortunate to be in a position to share these words, these sentiments, and these realities with all of you, and appreciate the opportunity. And we have a little small token of appreciation just for you to use to hold on your papers and keep on your desk from all of us.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both for coming, and board members from the MMA, welcome to the town of Auburn. And I think we should let the town manager have something to say after all of this praise.
Usually I'm not at a loss for words, as most people know. And usually I usually know what I'm going to say, and I'm absolutely not prepared to say anything. But excuse me, I think the first thing I want to do is thank all of you for coming here tonight. And, I look around and the room's full of not just colleagues, but friends. And that's one of the assets of being a member of the MMA, is that you meet great colleagues and also really good friends. So I thank all of you for doing that. Also want to especially thank the Board of Selectmen, because, as you said, Jeff, they give me the support and the direction and enable me to get involved and to hopefully do things beyond Auburn that will affect not just Auburn, but other communities in the state. So I appreciate that. And I see my husband, last time he was here, I was being sworn in, which was actually 9 years ago next week. week to this position. So thank you for putting up with me and for all my hours and for the craziness. And just to I look around, all the employees, just I wouldn't have any successes if it wasn't for this team that we have here. Ed Kazanovich is our Assistant Town Manager, CFO, and chief everything. And also just looking around at all the department heads and employees, I am truly blessed to work for this town. I am as thrilled to be here today as I was 9 years ago when I was sworn in, and it's because we have this team that's just incredible. So there's no I in it, it's just all of us together. And I think because we all work together, we all click, and we're able to accomplish things. So I appreciate that. That's one of the best parts about this job, is to work with all of you. So I want to thank you, especially Jim here coming out from Situate. Fortunately, no storms this week, which is unusual. But all of you, I just look around. I don't even know what to say or how to thank you. But really, you've been there for me through a lot of things in the last few years, good and bad. And appreciate all your support. And I love being involved. It's an honor to be the incoming president of the MMA. I'm really looking forward to that. And tough shoes to fill. I'm not as funny as Jim. I probably don't spend as much money as Jim may, but I'll try to follow well in his footsteps, and I won't be out on a beach in a snowstorm with all the press coming out at the same time. So at least we've all met the famous celebrity from the Situate Beach. But thank you very much. And just for Women Leading Government, it's a great a plug for that. But we appreciate the support that you've given to us, Jeff, because it's really important. As you said, less than 25% of women in the whole Commonwealth are in leadership roles in local government. And our hope is that we encourage women at all levels of government to strive to become supervisors, managers, hopefully down the road, town managers, town administrators, department heads. It's all about giving them networking opportunities, support, and training, and we thank you for budgeting for us to do that and for giving us the reins to do what we feel we need to do to help move the profession along. So I want to thank all of you, and I'm sure I missed someone, and I apologize if I did, but thank you.
Thank you. Well, I know the board has had an opportunity to speak on this issue previously, but I also know that we certainly don't want people to think that we're unappreciative, so I'm going to open it up for some brief comments, because we do have a full agenda. Mrs. Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am extremely proud of the manager's achievement, which is, of course, a credit to her professionalism and leadership, but also a tremendous source of pride for the town of Auburn. Our town's own leadership is being recognized at the national level among communities that anchor their own metropolitan areas. Truly, Ms. Jacobson's honor highlights the fact that she is a role model, for others in government, especially women. I'm proud of her, and I'm thrilled that for Auburn that we have the type of leadership that is celebrated in this way. Congratulations, Julie. It is my honor to serve on this board with you as town manager, and thank you for the opportunities you provide to work together for those we serve. And I will just add, since you recognize your husband, I spoke with your daughter today and showed her how to watch this live stream on YouTube. So she is extremely proud of you, and she's watching right now.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. Hi, Alyssa.
And are you all set, Mrs. Goodrich?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Liberty.
I just want to add that, and since you brought up the live stream, I've had several family members and friends tune in throughout the 2.5 years that I've been on the board, and every time they've all commented the same thing, that they were really impressed with that woman at the end. Who was, of course, they were referring to you, and it just goes to show how knowledgeable you are about any subject that comes before us, and the amount of work you put in, and how you come across to everyone viewing our meetings, and especially to us.
Thank you very much.
I'll just thank everybody for coming tonight and telling your stories about Julie. It's definitely awesome to hear from outside the town everything that she does. It doesn't surprise us to hear all that she does for outside the town, because we know all she does here inside the town. So she's a great leader here, and I'm sure she's going to be a great leader for the MMMA in the years to come. So I just want to thank everybody and thank Julie. It's been a pleasure to serve with her, and I look forward to the next couple of years as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before we recess to clear the room, I think it would be a wonderful and appropriate time to move up Agenda Item 5A, a vote to reappoint the town manager.
Exactly, but I haven't had an opportunity to speak myself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mrs. Goodrich has spent a lot of time chairing the meeting, so we can forgive her for her vast knowledge, and we're fortunate for her leadership in the past, and we certainly appreciate her. The chairman could not be here tonight due to ill health, so I will not speak for him, but I think I can say on behalf of him that he shares the sentiments that everybody has mentioned, including our esteemed guests. Thank you all for coming. It's wonderful to have a full room. It's a rare occasion, so it's always nice to have a full room and to hear what we hear on an almost routine basis, that the town manager does an okay job most of the time. So that's a good thing. So we wish you good luck in the year ahead, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
Now we will take a motion.
Motion to move up Agenda Item 5A.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is a vote.
Mr. Chairman, it's my pleasure to move to appoint Julie Jacobson as town manager for another 3-year term of the office effective January 31, 2020 through January 30th, 2023.
Is there a second?
There is a second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It is a vote. All right, and now I believe we have a...
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for a brief recess.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is a vote. We're actually going to take a few items out of order because we have a fairly lengthy presentation, and we would prefer that some people don't have to sit through something. Can I have a motion to move up item 3C and 3D?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is a vote. The first one is Prime Motor Group, Motor Vehicle Class 2 License and Auto Repair. Is anybody here from the applicant? If you'd join us at the table, please, and introduce yourself. Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can you just introduce yourselves for the record, please?
Chris Aliberti, I'm the general manager over there.
And my name is Joe Girardo. I am the chief legal counsel for Prime Automotive Group, which owns the dealership.
Okay. Can you just give us a brief overview? I know you built a brand-new facility over there. It looks beautiful.
Thank you.
So just give us a general overview of what you need from us.
We are here today looking for a Class 2 license. I will say before proceeding any further, I think we've had some disagreements about whether a Class 2 license is required under MGL Chapter 140, Section 58. But be that as it may, we are here and looking for a Class 2 license to allow us to sell used vehicles at the site as well as to service vehicles.
Ms. Jacobson, do you have anything?
Through the chair, yes, we had several discussions with representatives from Prime Motor Group, and we actually sought and received an opinion from town council, who did determine that we would need to ask the applicant for both licenses, that they would definitely need the Class 2 and the auto repair license based on a number of different questions that they had us posed. So that is why we are here this evening.
Okay. Do board members have any questions? Mrs. Goodrich?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the town manager, I see that there are several abutters advertised here. I would assume that this has already gone through the planning board and zoning board. Any issues that would have been addressed would have been addressed through those, and we're strictly here for the Class 2 license.
Through the chair, the prior project, yes, the expansion project had already passed and gone through all of its approval process. This is strictly just the 2 licenses for the doing business. This really came about as a result of the letter that went out standard to all businesses for license renewals, and at that time it was determined that actually 2 licenses were required, not just the 1.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Mr.
Just
Berthium?
functionally, nothing really is going to change, right? So you have customers that come in, they may want a new car, a used car, whatever, so not really any more traffic or anything like that.
No, nothing any different than what's currently set up the way that it is now.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, just for the record, did we open the hearing?
No, we did not.
I'll make a motion to open the hearing.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to include all the previous comments in this public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, it is a vote. And then we do have a lengthy list of abutters. Are there any abutters present who wish to be heard, or anybody in the audience who wish to be heard on this application? Seeing no one, is there a motion to approve or deny?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to
Actually,
close the hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, it is a vote. All right, now a motion to approve or deny, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the license, provided that all applicable requirements of the state and town and any of its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled. Said licenses are subject to all the conditions stated upon them. Failure to comply with any and all conditions shall invalidate the licenses and render them null and void.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, it is a vote. Congratulations, you're all set. Have a good night. Happy New Year.
Very much.
Excuse me.
All right, our second is a hearing for National Grid and Verizon. If you'd join us at the table, please, and introduce yourself for the record. And I believe we need a motion to open the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, it is a vote. Okay, good evening.
Hi, I'm Steve Susi from National Grid. The reason why we're petitioning to install a new...
Hold on, please, we have another...
George Wainaina, property owner, 42 Prospect Street.
Okay. Now, if you can proceed, thank you.
I was getting to introduce them. So we're petitioning to install the new pole because George wants to have an underground service to his home. The overhead, where it is now, it's a little bit low. We would like to raise it above the road as well. So because he has an underground service, of course, we can't cross the street. So we have to have the new pole and install that and an anchor in the public way.
Do board members have any questions? Seeing none. Are there any abutters present or anybody in the audience who'd like to speak on the issue? Seeing none. Motion to close.
Close the hearing.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, it is a vote. And if we could have a motion to approve or deny the request, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the petition for the pole located as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, it is a vote. It is unanimous. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You too.
New Year. We're just going to wait for the manager to return. And we have a presentation from Tecton Consultancy on a public safety building. Are there representatives? I see the chairman, if he'd like to join us at the table. And I don't know if your vice chair is here. I don't see him, or if anybody else would like to join you, so that you're not alone.
Mr. Chair, do you want to move the item on this, under town manager items right here, because that's the...
Sure, you want to do it concurrent? Sure, can we also move up town manager item? 6A, please.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? It is a vote. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, thank you for taking both of these items together, actually. So this evening, we actually have two parts to this discussion, and this is related to the public safety feasibility study that began with $150,000 appropriation from town meeting for the study, in which we hired Tecton, and they've done a tremendous job, and we'll be introducing them shortly. Tecton started their work approximately a year ago December, and around July, they had done enough preliminary analysis that we felt it was important to appoint a committee of residents to look at the recommendations and the options that Tecton was at that time evaluating, and to work with Tecton and come back and make a recommendation to town administration. So I'm happy to say, and there is a memo in your packet related to this, that I originally was thinking that we would appoint a 5 or 7 member committee, but we have such enormous amount of interest in the committee. We actually appointed 11 members of the community to serve on this committee. And Kevin Kennedy was unanimously elected at the first meeting to be the chair of it. So we thank Kevin for all his work and all of the committee. And there are some committee members in the audience this evening. They put a lot of work in. I'm going to let Kevin talk about that. But there is a letter in your packet from the committee with their recommendations on this, which I'll let Kevin explain. Then following this, we are going to have a presentation from the representatives of Tecton to just bring you up to speed for now as to where we are in this whole process. In your packets, and for anyone who's watching, we do have a proposed timeline in there. It is very, very preliminary because so many moving parts can change. So that timeline is really just to give you a general idea of how this process could work, but any one of those timeline items could move depending on another piece. So it is there really for just guidance. So with that being said, I just would like to turn it over to Kevin Kennedy, who's the chair of the committee, and have him discuss the recommendations.
Mr. Kennedy?
Hey, good evening, everybody. So Tecton's going to give you the bulk of the presentation with some of the details and the science behind the facilities, but just a little bit about our group. Julie said 11 members representing the community, diverse group, some with some public safety backgrounds, current public safety, past public safety. But the group got together, basically our mission was to evaluate the existing structures, the existing buildings, look at them to see if they were worthy of investing money, if they, in their current capacity, were sufficient, whether they needed some investment, whether that investment was worthwhile for the taxpayers of the town, based upon their current conditions. And if that was not the case, what would our options be for facilities? Would keeping the same format that we have currently, a separate police facility and 2 fire facilities, or would we be looking towards some combination thereof? We started out by doing tours of the facilities. I thought I knew the public safety facilities fairly well and what they comprised of, but after getting tours from the fire chief and police chief through the facilities, I realized that I didn't know them all that well. Basically, after touring those facilities, and I'll let the Tecton folks talk about some of the details of what the facilities have to offer and some of their shortcomings, but we discovered through those tours that our existing facilities are not sufficient to meet the needs currently, nor are they, for the future of our public safety in town. The police site was not sufficient, good facility, a young building per se in terms of buildings. However, it is probably the day they moved in was too small, and it is, we all know where it's located and how it's sort of bordered by roadways, that it does not allow for expansion. The site is too small. We looked at the current fire headquarters site, the Auburn Street Fire headquarters site, and saw that basically it was a great facility when it was opened, but fire apparatus and fire advancement and in all aspects of fire safety, that facility is not adequate for the apparatus, the firefighters that work out of that facility, administration, storage, a whole slew of things. And I'll let Tecton talk about some of the reasons why the site itself is not going to be a viable site for a replacement on that existing site. And then we looked at the substation, the West Auburn Street substation over at the old Randall School, for those who've been around long enough to know what the Randall School, and basically that they inherited, an old school cafeteria and did great with it for the time, but that one is not sufficient in any way, shape, or manner as a current substation. So when we looked at that, we came away from those our initial meetings to say that the current facilities nor their sites were adequate or something that we'd be looking to invest in further for expansion, renovation. So we looked and just made a determination through the meetings, what would our best option be? And the ideal option that we looked at, and I stress ideal because things, could be subject to change, but the ideal option was a single public safety facility. And that would require a certain amount of acreage, certain amount of space for future needs to build a single public safety, which would encompass all of our fire entities within town, as well as the police, all in one building. Deputy Chief Johnson did quite a bit of work on his own relative to response times. That was a concern of ours relative if we were going to close one station and move other stations, that no one within town would have to be concerned with a change in response time for the levels of service to change. In fact, we would hope for improvement. So there was sort of a window of space that we looked at for public sites. So basically, now we were looking towards, if we were to do this ideal public safety facility, combined facility, where would we locate that facility? So a list of sites were presented to us. Tecton took an initial look at some of those sites, made some determinations based on the geographic features of it, waterways, access, and kind of came back with some science for us on that. And we were able to eliminate some sites. Some sites were put on the back burner as less than ideal. All of the sites we looked at were determined initially to be along the Route 12 corridor. We did not do the Route 20 corridor in any way, shape, or form. We felt that was too busy of a roadway for emergency vehicles to be getting in and out of that facility. So we looked at I think it was 11 sites in total, maybe 11 or 12. And came down with a list of sites which are included in your packet there. In the discussion, they're there as to what were the pros of each site and the cons of each site. Some were eliminated right away. I'll give an example, being the driving range. Initially seems like a good site. It was within our area of response times for a good response times. However, quickly realized that the town wells and aquifer and whatnot would be below that site, so that would not be a usable site. So that had to be eliminated right away. So that's sort of where we stood. Basically, we narrowed down some sites. You've got all the sites before you there with our recommendations for a single public safety facility as opposed to the 3 separate facilities that we currently have. And certainly, if you want, however you want to proceed with this, if you want Tecton to do their presentation, and we can do a combined question and answer, or...
Sounds fine. That's okay with the board. Before we go to the presentation, do you want to identify some of the board members? I see them all sitting in back, trying to avoid
So other committee members, and thank you for attending. You've attended several of our meetings. We've got J.D. Dowd is here, as well as Deputy Chief Johnson sits on the committee. Retired Police Lieutenant Mark Maas is in the back row, and I think that's, and obviously Lieutenant Lemon is representative of the police station, doesn't actually sit as a member of the committee, but he has been an integral figure as far as getting information relative to the police station site.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, Chief Coleman over my left shoulder on the fire department.
He's going to kick it off, I hear tonight.
So, Mr. Chairman, I will introduce the members of Tecton. As the town manager had mentioned, we're very excited to be working with Tecton. They've been outstanding to work with over this past year. One of the advantages, just so the board knows, with selecting Tecton is that, especially when we're looking at a public safety complex, the needs of police and fire, although we share a similar mission, the needs are vastly different. And one of the advantages of working with Tecton is they actually partner with an architectural firm, Pacheco Ross, out of New York. So what you have in Tecton is an architectural firm that has 30 years of designing police stations. Pacheco Ross has 30 years of designing fire stations. And when they work on these public safety complexes, they have a partnership and come together. So you don't have a single architect that is sort of favoring one side or the other when it comes to design perspective. And that's a tremendous asset to us and to the committee when we're talking about the potential design of this building. So tonight I would like to introduce Jeff McElravy, who is the principal and owner of Tecton Architects. Next to him is Matt Salad, one of the engineers with Tecton, and then Dennis Ross from Pacheco Ross. So I will turn it over to these gentlemen, however they want to proceed, in what order. Presentation will be up on the screen here, so I will turn it over to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Thank you, Julie, Board, for inviting us to come speak with you tonight. And I'd also like to thank both the Fire Police Departments and the Public Safety Facility Advisory Committee for allowing us to collaborate with them on this process. It's been a great effort over the past year to really get to know the community in both of these departments and really help assist them in determining what's best moving forward for this community. Our team, as mentioned, Jeff McElravy, Dennis Ross, Rebecca Hopkins, who's not with us today, is a member of the Tecton team that participated in-house in this project, and myself, and then the various, the advisory committee, as well as other folks in town who were instrumental in going through this process. I'm going to give a sort of brief overview of sort of where we've come over the past year, and then Dennis and I are going to speak specifically to the deficiencies with the existing buildings and why the recommendation had come to move forward with a different solution rather than renovating and adding on to what you have currently. So we looked at all three of the sites, the police headquarters, fire headquarters, and the West Station, and we looked at a lot of the deficiencies as far as the building, the site, and where they are located within the town and their ability for the emergency responders to respond out of those sites. With this, we looked at issues with FEMA, flooding, we looked at wetlands, ability to expand on these properties, and how we can project the buildings to be expanded over the next 50 years and into the future, because we can't fall into the same trap of designing a building that's going to last the town another 20 years. We really want to look for the next 50 to 75 years to make sure that the town is investing their funds appropriately moving forward. So we spent a lot of time early on working with both departments, various members of fire and police, dispatchers, anybody and everyone we could speak with, and going through a very detailed space needs analysis, understanding what they have currently, how they use these spaces that they currently have, and what they really need to perform their functions effectively and efficiently now, and project that out over the next 50 years. In this, we really took a deep dive in understanding the way each department specifically works, and then we balance that against national and local trends of modern public safety facilities using our own expertise to educate both departments into what sort of spaces can be utilized going forward to maximize their efficiency and modernize their operations. From that initial set of ideas, concepts, and spaces, we spent several months refining all of that down. So it wasn't really just taking the wants of of both departments, but really getting down to the needs to make sure that they weren't really overreaching and being efficient in their ask. In this way, we're sort of leveraging the most value for this process moving forward, because it's not just grabbing anything they can take. It's really making sure that they have an efficient program that's going to give a better value to the town when it starts to become an actual building. So we're going to talk a little bit about the deficiencies of each facility as they stand, a little bit of history on the first police headquarters, which was on Southbridge Street in 1970, and then the new location, which opened in 2000. This is just some historical images from the original police station, and I think just by looking at some of the computers and paperwork and things like that, you can see sort of how policing has changed over the years. This is vastly different in how they operate within these buildings now than they used to operate back in, the 70s and 80s. And even in 2000, we really couldn't forecast the amount of technology that goes into these facilities today. And so that's something that's always at sort of the top of mind when we're programming these and trying to understand how the departments are going to work in the future, because if we can sort of plan for what technology is coming up, we can sort of maximize the ability for these facilities to be adapted. So the existing building's a wood frame building, 5B construction. The lower level is masonry. And it was sort of built for the size of the department at that time, and it wasn't really forecasting out the growth of the department in the future. So between 1991 and 2019, this is sort of a takeoff of the police department staffing. And as you can see, over the past 30 years, there's been a 330% increase in that staff. You'll notice if you start to compare other local towns of similar size, their police departments are actually a little bit smaller. And a lot of that is due to the Route 12 corridor and and Route 20. You just have more traffic, you have more activity, you have the Auburn Mall, so there's more need for more officers based on the amount of calls and things like that happen in town. If you've ever driven by the police department, one of the first things you'll notice out on site is the parking is at its capacity. There's hardly enough parking on site for just the officers and their vehicles, let alone visitors that are coming in interacting with the police. This is an aerial showing that there's overflow parking actually going across the street. And one of the issues with this site is based on its shape. It's sort of a crescent-shaped, very narrow site. It's bound by two roads to the north and south. And to the other ends of the site where it pinches down, it's surrounded by wetlands. So there's really no expansion capacity on this property in any direction for additional parking or for construction. And just to show the amount of people that actually visit the police department from the public, they see on average 8,000 visitors annually into this police department. And the lobby is the first place that most people interact with the police. It's one small room. And it should be noted that there's a lot of different people that enter this lobby to interact with the dispatchers. There's people making records requests. There's a general public that are coming in to make complaints to the police. There's also sex offenders that are registering. And so you have a lot of interaction between different use groups that you may not want to have. And there's no means for those different groups of people to be separated as the department is currently. This is a couple of images of the dispatch center and some of the comm equipment. There's a lot of technology and there's a lot of data that gets transmitted through communication centers nowadays. There's a lot of servers and secure server space that's required to make sure that a lot of that data is safe. And there's a lot of standards that dictate emergency communications, in particular NFPA 1221, which requires a number of things, one of which being a 2-hour fire separation between the dispatch center, the communications equipment, and the rest of the facility. The intent here is that if there's any emergency or natural disaster that happens in town, the lights need to be on, and this facility needs to be operational so that dispatchers can speak to the rest of the emergency responders and allow them to respond out into the public. Record storage, there's a lot of records that need to be maintained for 7, 20, and even longer. So a lot of these records are required for on-demand requests from the public, but a lot of them also need to be retained down the road. So there's a lot of paper records that are stored in these facilities. This is just a portion of it, and we're just completely maxed out of space. This is more record storage throughout the facility and some evidence storage. One of the issues you'll see here is there's actually a large commercial dehumidifier in the lower level. One of the issues with the police department as it stands is there's a problem with the slab and moisture mitigation, so they're constantly dehumidifying the space where the records are stored and where the evidence is stored. This obviously can lead to mold propagation throughout the facility, and it can also lead to a lot of these records and pieces of evidence that are being maintained for long periods of time to degrade and become destroyed. And so pieces of evidence that are being held for long periods of time because of unsolved and unresolved cases may become a large issue going into the future. And then this is some of the evidence storage. A lot of these pieces of evidence need to be maintained for very long periods of time, and some forever. And so they're completely out of space there. And again, there's issues with moisture. There's issues on this lower level with flooding. They had a sewage backup just a couple of weeks ago, and you can see that some of this evidence has to be stored on the floor, and so it's very susceptible to damage. There's a lot of inadequate locker spaces. You can see how jammed full all these lockers are. A lot of this equipment, it's kind of like your kid's hockey equipment coming back. It's very, it's out on a long, hot day, and it's out in the sun, and there needs to be proper ventilation for these lockers. Normally, we actually tie the lockers into an actual duct system, so it's actually exhausting a lot of those fumes, so they're not, again, creating mold and other issues within the facility. And the mechanical equipment is also an issue. It's outdated. The generator's too close to the building, which poses a fire risk. And this louver right here is actually on the lower level, and it's at the bottom of a hill, and basically all day long, all year, leaves and dust and debris blow into that, and that's the main intake for all the fresh air that goes into the building, and it's continuously clogged and requires a lot of maintenance. The Sally Port is the first place where prisoners are brought into a police station. As you can see from these images, there's many issues, one of which is you can't open the cruiser doors without hitting a wall or a column, so taking a prisoner that's combative out of a cruiser and getting them into the cells is an issue. The Sally Port also has storage within it, so that can be something that a prisoner can get a hold of and use as a weapon or hold themselves as they're being detained. And if a prisoner ever needs to have medical attention, ideally you can get an ambulance into the Sally Port, a stretcher rolled out, and that way you can get that prisoner onto the stretcher and into the ambulance in a secure environment. Currently, the ambulance won't fit into the Sally Port, so they have to actually take the prisoner out into the parking lot. The prisoner processing area in the cells, this is where intake happens, breathalyzer tests, this is where prisoners are fingerprinted and their mugshots are taken. There's a lot of technology that goes into here, and there's a lot of issues with the current design as far as only one prisoner is able to be detained and processed at one time. There could be a time where there's 3 or 4 different prisoners being that need to be processed simultaneously, so there's no proper holding facilities until somebody is processed. And then just the general makeup of the processing desk is plastic laminate. It's not a strong, sturdy material. It can actually be broken apart and used as a weapon if a detainee was to get a hold of that. And then there's issues with the cells. They're just sort of just barely passing DPH requirements, Department of Public Health, so they need attention just to maintain that. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dennis, who's going to talk a little bit about Fire Headquarters and the West Station.
Which is my special button, this one?
Yep.
Great. Good evening. Thank you very much. I'm going to talk in the same tone that Matt has about certain deficiencies, but we're going to carry it into a few different directions. First of all, just like the police, the fire has seen a vast increase in number of calls over the years, as you can see, and those total calls, at least based on national averages, don't come down. They continue to rise, and I'm assuming they will continue to rise at about the same rate. One of the reasons is fire is doing more and different types of response. You know, you think of your fire department, hey, they answer fire calls. Well, they do. And they answer hazmat calls, and they answer emergencies, and they answer roadway calls, and they assist the police, and they do many, many other things, and it's always increasing. So the calls are increasing. When the calls increase, the apparatus and the equipment they carry on that apparatus becomes different types of equipment. All right. Also, the way the fire department works is they are also on shifts. All right, so you have paid folks who actually show up for their shift. You have shift change, where they overlap, so you're going to have parking issues where one shift comes in, the other shift may still be cleaning up, getting ready to leave, but there will be some overlap, and you have to account for that in both space and parking. And you can see the original fire headquarters on top. A second floor was added, I believe, in the 80s. Actually, it was added in 1995, excuse me. And there was some renovation done a couple of years ago. But you can see the equipment, and if you take a hard look at, what was there back, in the 50s, it was very different than what you see today. Obviously, there's a size and a weight difference. Perfect example. If you look at these pieces of equipment and you look at the doors behind them, you go, all right, how do we get those things in there? It's not easy. Not that they're bad drivers, but, it often happens. You're going to take out a mirror or a set of lights on top of a fire truck, all right? You'd be astounded at what it costs to replace that stuff. Another thing, if you look down in the corner, Tower 1, you can see how close it gets to the street before it can actually pull out of the station. All right, for safety reasons, and so you don't knock your building down, you want that piece of fire apparatus completely out of the building before it addresses the street and makes a turn. That's far too close. All right, that's just not a safe situation. We recommend nationally for a minimum of 60 feet, and that's to the property line, not to the street. This at best is about 40, so quite short. You can see that we're sharing parking. We obviously have site constraints. You can see the amount of trailers that are stored outside, so they're subject to weathering, degradation. And it would be lovely to get those things inside and protected because there's quite an investment in there. We can list them all, but it's for emergency management, special ops, different kinds of response, homeland security, and safe trailers. And getting that equipment inside would be a very good thing. So the site itself, as Matt had mentioned, we have the Auburn Pond. The building is shown outlined up in the corner on Auburn Street. The pond poses a problem in that it does flood, it does project itself. If you can see this blue line out here with the striping, that's actually a floodplain, all right? And there's some pretty hard and fast rules from FEMA about building emergency facilities in a floodplain, specifically fire stations. FEMA comes up with what they call ADG and SAFER grants every year to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. If you build a new fire station or renovate a station willingly in a floodplain like this, you are no longer eligible for those FEMA grants. They'll cut you off. So it speaks volumes to not want to actually rebuild or renovate here in a floodplain. As you can see, we'll go through the building quickly. The lobby, far less than what even the police have. It needs to be used as a safe haven. There's no seating. It's just far too small for a public building and doesn't serve its purpose. Conference room has been diminished in order to make room for deputy chief's office. We met many times in here. It was extremely crowded, very difficult to use, but they have made do with what they have. Again, just like Matt showed with the police, we have understair storage, which, by the way, violates building codes in Massachusetts, but there's absolutely nowhere else to store stuff, and you can see they've got files, other kinds of storage that they need room for. This is the one that concerns me because this is actually a life safety issue. When you see apparatus this close to the doors and this close to each other. Imagine an 80,000-pound vehicle moving with a firefighter or firefighters next to it or actually up against it. They don't stand a chance. All the clearances around, above, behind, and front are far, far too close to walls, other apparatus. I mean, it's just a very unsafe situation. Recommendation, believe it or not, for the minimum distance in there would be 6 to 8 feet. That's about 2.5. Another thing we have is they don't have a place to properly store or dry their gear. You can see different types of gear. Just so you know, that Auburn is probably paying somewhere around $3,000 for a set of basic fire gear. And that does not include your hat, your gloves, or your boots. All right, and that's just basic. So you're trying to dry this stuff, clean it, decontaminate it in a situation where you're hanging it on ladders. This is not how you want to treat, $8,000 worth of gear. And it needs to be decontaminated, and I'll get to that in a moment. Obviously, again, storage, you can see up on the mezzanine, if you want to call it that. They're putting stuff wherever they can. The West Street Station, and I think I said this in my last presentation, is pretty much going to be the same type of thing. This was a school building. It was converted. It was never meant for the kind of hard use it gets. Any one of these engines probably weighs anywhere from 40 to 50,000 pounds. Fill it up with water, park it in on a little 4-inch slab, and it'll crack the slab. It just wasn't meant for this kind of use. Building is completely deteriorated, and you can see how they're parking. It doesn't even fit in there. And again, they have all the same space issues, clearance issues, height issues as the main station. Again, storage and locker area. Again, you're mistreating gear. You don't have any gender equity in your locker room. People are, piled up on each other. And again, you can see, we have a motorcycle parked in here along with tool storage, along with gear drying. So they're just working on top of each other on everything here. So this is what I really want to talk about quickly, is some trends. That's going to go into police trends, and then I'm going to talk about fire trends.
So we talked about the lobby a little bit earlier and some of the issues they have here. Some of the spaces that come off of a modern public safety police station lobby is going to be training rooms, a community room, licensing, permitting, records request area, dispatch area, and they all need to be adequately positioned off of this lobby in a way that's clear and legible to the public, and it also needs to be a welcoming space to the public, because this is where they're interacting with the police the most, and you don't really want it to be a negative space when they first interact with the police. And understanding that, again, the different use groups that come into the space, and having a way for them to be organized so that you're not dealing with a child and their mother and a sex offender that's registering. Proper community training in emergency operations centers are critical, making sure that they have all of the technology that's needed for the different departments to come into this space and utilize it during an emergency. And this is also used for inter-office training, so this can be utilized by both police or fire, but can also be used for other police departments and fire departments from around the Commonwealth to come in and utilize for specific training seminars, some internally run by the departments, and some also by the various policing and fire organizations. Modern communication space, making sure that the dispatch center has enough space so that all of these monitors can be readily available and accessible by the dispatchers. They're dealing with a lot of technology. They're not just taking your call when you dial 911. They're typically also dealing with most of the town security systems and all of their video surveillance. as well as the surveillance and security throughout the building itself. So these are the eyes on the streets for the community. So making sure they have good access to all of these things, but also making sure they're comfortable. There's a lot of issues with PTSD with dispatchers, so making sure that they have a safe, comfortable space, because sometimes they get some very disturbing calls and are dealing with some very troubling situations, and they have to be cool, calm, and collect when they're talking to these people over the phone to make sure that they're keeping them calm while at the same time dispatching the first responders that are going to remedy the situation. And then making sure that officers have modern, open, comfortable spaces so they can perform their work efficiently and adequately. It's not just jumbled pieces of paper everywhere. It's thoughtfully designed spaces that allow them to execute each of their tasks in an efficient manner, because if they're able to do their jobs better within the department, they can better respond to the community. Proper evidence processing, interview rooms, making sure that the chain of custody is intact for any evidence that's coming into a police station, making sure that it goes from an officer to an evidence officer and stays in storage so that it's not getting passed between a bunch of different hands, which would then invalidate that evidence when it goes to trial. And then making sure that the sally port is a good space that an ambulance can get into and that an officer can be protected while transporting a prisoner into the station itself. And then finally, the prisoner areas themselves, making sure they're clean, efficient spaces that are safe, again, for the officers and for the prisoners, making sure that the booking and intake process is efficient, clean, and safe. There's a lot of people coming in that may want to do harm, and we need to make sure that there's a place that they can be detained in a way where they're able to calm down until they're ready to be properly booked and handled by an officer. And then their lawyers and bail clerks and things like that can then enter the facility and manage them from that point forward. And now Dennis is going to talk a little bit about fire trends quickly, and then we're going to just touch on the budget.
One of the big things that we really want to talk about here is the health and wellness, all right? This is nothing but a red list of things we don't use in buildings, and unfortunately your buildings are full of them. More importantly, this is what I really want to talk about, is what we're looking for is indoor environmental quality to take care of sleep deprivation, cancer prevention, look after their physical and mental health in a holistic approach to design. So what does all that really mean? It means that when we look at the current station and we look at cancer prevention and we look at the things that we need to do to keep firefighters and police officers healthy and clean, all right, you know, in our professional determination, those existing buildings cannot be made to do that, all right? We do have the power architecturally to design ways in to do these things, but to take the building that exists and do that, there is really no way to do it. And you can see we're looking at decontamination, resiliency, cancer awareness. Cancer awareness is more, it's really cancer prevention, health and safety, flexible training. We need gender equity, ADA accessibility. We have what we call hot and cold zone transitions. That's going from contaminated areas to clean or clean to contaminated. Sustainability and managing mental health again. And if you doubt the seriousness of the cancer and the issues involved, if you look way down in the corner, tomorrow morning I am sitting on the NFPA Council for Emergency Responder Occupational Health. I believe I'm the only architect in the country sitting on that. And we are actually rewriting the NFPA rules, which is National Fire Prevention Association rules and regulations on how to actually operate within your fire station. So we're talking about proper decontamination, proper lockers, different forms of decontamination. Up in the corner, that's a proper way to dry uniforms using a piece of equipment like that and getting through, and then just all the other spaces, lockers, bunk rooms, I want to do this quickly, admin spaces, and then back to Matt.
And so one of the last pieces is redundancy and resiliency. Again, these as mentioned before, these facilities need to be in operation during the worst of times. So the last place for the lights to go down is going to be your police and fire stations. So making sure that the mechanical systems are robust enough and have redundancies built in, so if any piece of equipment fails, that the facility can still operate. We're required to have the facility on backup generator with an uninterruptible power supply for a minimum of 72 continuous hours. So if there is something like the October snowstorm or Superstorm Sandy that comes through, there needs to be enough fuel in that generator to run that facility for 72 hours, in which time we can plan for another backup system in case we don't have source power restored. And then consolidation of departments. Kevin had touched on that we're looking at potentially consolidating 3 departments into a single facility. These are some of the spaces that you eliminate having in each building in under a consolidation. So a single fitness center, a single lobby space, a single training area, an EOC, and a reduction in your mechanical systems because they're all sort of combined into one single plant. So with that, we're going to touch briefly on the budget. We took these numbers essentially from the space needs assessments we had done, one for each separate facility and then one for a joint combined public safety facility, and we'll show sort of the delta and the cost of that. These are prices that are escalated to midpoint of construction, assuming 2023 spring. And so that's sort of when we're looking to sort of track this project out, and that's where it sort of falls in line with the schedule that you have in your packet. These numbers are based on today's values and an average cost per square foot for what we see nationally and what we see in the Commonwealth for police stations, fire stations, and joint public safety facilities. This is solely based on the square footage from the space needs and those numbers that we see across the Commonwealth. So the numbers could go up and they could go down based on site constraints, what we have existing that we have to deal with, the design of the building and its efficiency. So we have some sort of contingencies built into these numbers that allow some flexibility as we dive into the design, which is sort of the next phase of the process. Again, so we're assuming midpoint of construction spring of 2023. Just as a point of reference, construction cost escalation on average outpaces inflation, which is about 2%. Construction cost escalation averages 3 to 6.5%. And right now we're sort of in that higher end of escalation right now because of the way that the construction market is. It's just sort of saturated with the work at this time. So the standalone police headquarters, based on the space needs assessment, we're looking at a projected project cost of around $23 million. This is a full project cost, so this isn't just construction. This is fees and all the soft costs associated. Standalone fire headquarters is around $18 million. And then if we were to do a standalone fire substation for the needs today, it would be about $8.8 million. So that's a total facilities cost of around $50 million for all 3 facilities. Again, this is assuming spring 2023 of all of them at the same time. It would be assumed that these probably would phase out over 20 years or so. So as time goes on, again, escalation factors would have to apply, and those numbers could certainly go up. And then here's a detailed cost analysis of what we had done for the joint public safety facility. So this shows more of a breakout of sort of all the line items that we address when we look at these cost estimates. These are built into those first numbers. This is sort of how we look at these on a per square foot basis. And if we were to look at a single public safety facility combined, we're looking at just under $40 million based on what we have programmed right now for the total project cost. And if you want, we can get more into the weeds of some of these line items, but I think really the main point is that by combining all these 3 facilities into a single building, we're looking at today a 2023 net savings of $10.5 million as opposed to doing all 3 separately. And then there's some, of course, life cycle savings as well for maintaining and operating that building over the next 20 to 50 years based on its maintenance schedule. And I think with that, we'll just open it up to any questions, and apologize for running a little long. It's a lot of information to cover.
Not long at all, actually. Very, very good pace. Mrs. Jacobson, do you have anything else?
Through the chair, I would just ask Kevin Kennedy if you want to expound on any of the recommendations now that we've seen this.
No, I think based on the Tecton's presentation, I think it's appropriate for any questions from the board.
Board members have any questions? Mrs. Goodrich?
Thank you. Through you to Chairman Kennedy. First of all, thank you for the work you and your committee have done on this. My questions are specific to the sites. I know that you've looked at several sites, and in your presentation, you have 2 sites that are in consideration, and the recommendation is to pursue the acquisition of these sites. And I've watched your meetings, too. What have the discussions been on sites if these 2 sites don't work out for whatever reason? You know, they're unaffordable, or specifically the Sears, which I think is a great site, unable to cut it up properly. Are you confident that you've addressed every site within the town, presented it to us, and these are the only 2 suitable sites?
Well, I'll let the town manager talk a little bit about the sort of the directions relative to proposals and putting out. So I think we've sort of made a determination of where our range would be in terms of sites for response times. We've also sort of made determinations on rough estimates through Tecton as to what size of the site would be necessary to properly accommodate. So that sort of limits us as to the sites that were available. Those 2 sites that we presented are, one is on the market, the old Yankee Drummer site, and the Sears site appears to be going through a change as we speak with closing of the Sears property. That's not to say there aren't potential, if there could be something else out there in that corridor. Some of the other sites that we looked at that weren't ideal, certainly if those 2 sites didn't come to fruition, I think we could go back to the committee and say what else would be less than ideal, the things to look at again. But those were the 2 that sort of presented themselves, were reviewed, met the size requirements, the availability requirements. So I hope that answers your...
Mr. Chairman, if I might just follow up and maybe reword that a little bit. So let me just start by saying we've been through this process before with the schools, and the most important thing is for your committee to be able to go out and talk to the voters about this and the residents who we will ultimately need support. And in the 11th hour of getting close to this vote, I don't want it to be thrown out there that well, have you looked at this? Oh, have you looked at that? I guess my direct question is, you're confident that you've looked at the sites that will adequately support a public safety complex, and your committee's done that work already?
Those 2 sites that we've identified would meet all of the needs for a public safety complex. And I'm sure there are going to be folks that are going to come to us and say, we like the Shaw's site, should that become available? Or we like, other pieces of property. But those 2 sites that we've identified will meet all our needs. It appears that they are going to be commercially available sites that the town can look into going through the appropriate acquisition process to look at those sites potentially. And certainly, yes, if anybody came, we could certainly discuss some of the shortcomings. Shaw's would be a great site. It's those parking lots are utilized for school functions as well. However, it just comes just outside of that response area that puts it just a little bit further north on Route 12. Not by much. Sears isn't just down the road, but it just put itself out a little bit where we'd have to start talking about maybe peeling off a sub-fire station for West Auburn to kind of keep those response times where we wanted them. So there is certainly, if those 2 sites that we identified didn't come to fruition, certainly we'd have to kind of go back a little bit to the drawing board and see where things were at that time. I hope that answers.
It absolutely does. And just to finish up, I live on in West Auburn, which is almost to the Oxford line. So I appreciate, through the chief and you, the efforts that have been made to ensure that the response times are appropriate. You know, having needed those emergency services, I know what those times mean. So thank you for always keeping those in consideration.
You're all set?
I am, thank you.
Any other board members have a question?
I just have a comment in looking at the facilities and having worked at a couple of the facilities. Yeah, I'm completely in agreement with the fact that none of the facilities are sufficient to go forward, and very much in favor of a single facility. But also, I want to keep in mind when designing our new facility and our whatever property we choose, is that, you know, Auburn is a very, very centrally located town and is going to be very attractive for, you know, police seminars, fire seminars, and things like that, trainings. So when we take into consideration the new facility and the new property, that we also want to make ourselves a bit marketable in that hopefully, you know, we can generate some revenue by, you know, if there's, you know, need for a police academy course or something that we can possibly also make a little bit by utilizing our facilities, utilizing our hotels in town to have a convention or something like that. You know, K-9 is becoming very big, so make sure that we have, you know, a bit of a area for K-9 training and that type of thing. So I'm excited to see some of the new things that are coming along, and I just definitely want to keep in mind that, you know, we're going to be an attractive community for many things to come, and we want to market ourselves a little bit as well to bring in income, as well as utilize and have, you know, the most modern and best facilities in the area. So that's just a comment, not any critique or anything from anything that you've done. So I appreciate all the work that's been done, and I'm excited to see what comes down in the future.
Anything else from board members, Mr. Liberty?
Through the chair. So I just had one question that jumped out at me when I was watching the presentation. So to Tecton, with the police station, with regards to records keeping, is it a mass law, just out of curiosity, that requires the public records be kept on paper as well as digital? I mean, I'm assuming that's why they take up so much space.
Yes, there are Massachusetts laws that require the retention of certain types of materials. There has been a trend in policing throughout the country to start getting the ability to digitize more and more documents, but even in that case, there are still a lot of documents today that are still required to be retained in paper form.
What's the, sorry, yes, of course. What's the longest that you're aware of for a paper document, or some indefinite? Sure.
In an open case, particularly a homicide case, you could have to retain it indefinitely.
Thank you.
Anything else from the committee or from town administration or Chief Coleman?
Through the chair, yes, I'd like to just follow up and clarify the process for acquisition. Should the decision be made to move forward on something like this? So, first of all, I want to thank the committee for all the work they did. It's a tremendous amount of research and evaluation and analysis, and thanks to Tecton. And also have to wish Matt and Dennis from Tecton happy birthday, because it is both of their birthdays today. They've chosen to share it with us, so thank you.
Wouldn't have it any other way.
Thank you. So I think it just, so the public understands how this would happen. So there are 3 different mechanisms for property acquisition for a municipality. and this is probably in the order of preference. The first one would be under a Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30B, procurement of land, which would be to put out an RFP for land for the development of a public safety facility, and at that, you would develop the criteria to be within the boundaries of the area that has been determined to be the best response time. And you would ask for proposals that met all of your criteria, and any property owner in that area of which we need to stay would be eligible to put a bid in for either a lease or a sale. That has to be determined. So the town cannot just go and approach a property owner under that scenario and just say, we'd like to negotiate a price with you. We have to go through a process. The second way to do that is through special legislation, which is very time-consuming, it's lengthy, and uncertain as to when it would happen and if it would happen, because you're seeking the legislative body to approve of special legislation. So that's not a guarantee that you would actually get that, but that would allow the town to direct negotiate with a specific property owner. And the third mechanism is eminent domain. Eminent domain, again, is most likely the most costly and time-consuming of all three methods. Under eminent domain, you still have to pay market rate, you have to get appraisals, there's opportunities for the property owner to appeal your decision and your purchase price, in which case you have to get additional appraisals, and you could end up in court, and it could be very costly. So at this point, if we were to proceed in consultation with town council, Ed Kazanovich and myself have spoken to him, we would recommend the best process would be the Chapter 30B RFP process for soliciting proposals. So I just wanted to make that clear. There is a timeline in your packet, and Matt, I want to thank him for his help on that. This really, as I said, there's a number of steps that need to be gone through, but it would be just moving forward through the chair, it would be our recommendation that this is the initial meeting that the Board of Selectmen has had to see all this information. The committee has had several meetings. You've been meeting since early September, and they've done a yeoman's amount of work in that time. I think it would be important for the board to consider holding a number of public meetings and public hearings, and we would recommend joint meetings with the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, at least to start discussing this and start to discuss the budget and the financial impacts of this, and then maybe after a couple of those meetings, have a couple of additional public hearings. I've laid out a timeline here. If the board is seeking to do this and to put it on the upcoming November election, the Secretary of State requires that communities to place a local ballot question on a national election. It's a state election for a national election, that we would have to get it to the Secretary of State by the first Wednesday in August, which this year is August 5th. So if you back that up, for the board to take a vote to put the question on the ballot, you would have to take that vote by July 13th, or probably at the latest July 27th, based on your schedule, or somewhere in between there, just to make sure that we get it there by the 5th. Then if you flash forward on the time chart, in November, presumably you would have a ballot question for a debt exclusion. Then after that, the board would have to take a vote to establish a special town meeting. That would most likely happen in January of 2021, so we're looking a year ahead. Once town meeting and the voters approve of the debt exclusion and approve of the appropriation to move forward, at that time, you could begin to put your RFP out to solidify which site you're going to go on. Once you know what site it is, it's at that point that the design can start. The design really can't start prior to that, because the design at this point will be specific to a site. And without knowing that site, we don't want to start the design. So then there's a process for the design, there's a process for the preparation of bid docs, then there's going out to bid for construction, contract award, and if you carry this forward, we were looking somewhere around August of 2022 for the start of construction, with an an end date of December of 2023. So that, again, all of this can be flexible, but there are some specific limitations, specifically with regard to getting it on a November ballot. Of course, if you wanted to have a special election, that is an option. It's something that the board could consider. We just thought we would put it out there for the earliest possible vote would probably be the November election. So our recommendation would be for the board to continue these conversations, to likely set up a couple of meetings with the Finance Committee, as we had done with the middle school project. There were some joint meetings, 1 or 2 joint meetings, probably important to do that, and then maybe in May and June, hold some meetings for the public to see this information. There's a lot. As Matt said, you got all this into a quick presentation tonight, which we appreciate, because we had asked you to do that, but I think over time, there's a lot more information that we want to make sure the public has before any of you make an informed decision. You need to have the data, and the data exists. They've got all the information that we've asked them to provide under the scope of services. So I think moving forward, we just need to continue to have public meetings to talk about this.
Berthew?
Along with that comment on data in future meetings, and I don't want to address it tonight by getting any answers from anybody, but obviously, you know, my first thought is, when I look at a new $40 million facility, is, you know, how much can we recover from the old facilities by a resale value and that type of thing. You know, the Randall School is not only just a fire head or a fire substation, but it's also a school building. So would we not be able to, you know, resell that building because the school is there? As far as the fire headquarters, we're talking about doing a whole revamping of the Drury Square area. So do we take into consideration that, you know, that might become a retail space and have some value there? So these are all things that I'm sure the public is going to want to hear as far as recovery and help to pay some of this $40 million. You know, obviously there's grants and everything else that we're going to be going for, but it's certainly something that I think is going to be one of my first questions going forward. And again, not looking for any discussion tonight, but just something that I definitely would like to see in a future presentation as to what we think we can recover from the existing properties. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I can just add one thing, and I apologize, I should have added this before. When Ed and I started to do this time frame, we were doing this with a keen eye to when the debt will be retired on the high school. So the debt will be retired on the high school in 2024. So we are allowed to then ban or short-term borrow for construction up to 2 years prior to the time you permanently take a bond on it, which would be not before 2024. So that's why we want to make sure the construction schedule fell in with that 2022 area, because you could ban construction costs from 2022 to 2024. Then when the high school debt retires, you could take this up on it. That being said, there's still a delta between the amount of the high school debt and what this project would be, so I think there's absolutely a value to having future discussions on impact on taxpayers. How do we structure the debt? How long do you structure the debt? And what type of impact that this would have based on your debt schedule.
Did I see your hand up, Mr. Goodrich? Sorry. No. So before we adjourn, I'm certainly not going to commit to the timetable. So I'm just going to say that because in the past it's been said that the board had never said anything about it. So I'm not going to commit to your timetable. So I just want to get that out there.
This isn't, there is no way to commit to the timetable because the timetable is going to be fluid. This is, as I said, this is just a guidance to give everybody somewhat of an idea of what we're talking about here. This is a lengthy process. It's not going to be decided in one night, 1 month, and maybe even under a year. So this is nothing that anyone has to commit to. This is specifically just giving you some options and showing you best case scenario, how long will it take to get here.
I just want to go on record that, just so that there's no confusion on my part, that I'm not committing to any timetable tonight. Another question that I have, which similar to Mr. Berthium's, is demolition cost. We're talking about saving $10 million, okay? Well, we have 3 buildings, potentially. What is the cost of that? I would like to see that figure, and that should be part of this discussion, because unlike with the schools, where we've been sitting for years on 2 schools, that thankfully, hopefully, we're nearing the end of the tunnel. I want us to have a glide path to what are we going to do with these buildings, because if we want to put money into programs, then we need to not have 10 buildings in town for this and that. So I'm all for putting money into programs and seeing us improve the working conditions of all employees. So I'm certainly not mindful of, I've had the opportunity of touring the fire station a couple of times and the police station more than a few times, so I'm well aware of its challenges. So I'm certainly not making up my mind one way or the other tonight. So that is something that I would like to do, and also would like to try and see if we can do some tours of some buildings that are recently built that you may have done, so that we can make sure that as we're evaluating this process that we learn from other communities, you know. Something as simple as, you know, not putting a light switch somewhere, and it just seems kind of silly, but I know in your presentation that the Sally Port there's something that somebody can get a hold of. And those type of things might seem minor and might seem beneath our review, but I think we definitely want to make sure that, you know, we don't want to put the washers in a room without electric service, and we want to make sure that every tiny little detail that we can avoid any of the errors or oversights of the past are not repeated. And I'm very happy to hear that we're looking at 50 to 75 years, because I'm not even 50 and we've already built 2 new police stations. So I don't think I'm going to be around, hopefully, in 50 years. So, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that hopefully this one's going to last more than 20 years. Awful expensive. Mr. Kennedy, yes.
Mr. Chairman, just since 2 board members have brought it up, so we just had some very, you know, conversational levels as to the same concerns about those buildings. And the police station, although it has outgrown its usefulness as a police facility and has some challenges for them, it's still structurally, and the architects can speak to that a little bit, is a viable building, and there's been some talk that the school department would be a good fit for that existing building. It's town-owned. It's got the meeting space. It could be televised for their meetings, appropriate office space, reception area. So that building in itself, we sort of in mind, relative to the other buildings and the disposition of those, I can't answer that. I would like to comment that both the police and fire chief were very receptive to having public tours of the building. So going forward, as you get public input, they were very receptive to that. And yeah, I do applaud your idea that as we get to that design phase, should the town go in that direction, that to look at some of their other success stories that the architects have worked on through other communities.
So if we're going to modify a building, that would be similar. How much is it going to cost to take it from a jail to, maybe the superintendent would like to put some of the kids in jail, but I don't think she can. So what are we going to have to do to modify it so that it's useful as well? So because those are real costs, just like the costs that we bear on our schools, which we know we're going to get a good result out of it, but there's a little pain right now with the process, which is nobody's fault. So I'm not raising it for that point, just as an example. Chief, did you have something? You're at the microphone.
I just wanted to let the board and the public know that this presentation that was delivered tonight is already on the town's website. So if they go to auburnguide.com, on the home page on the news flash section, if they click there, they'll be able to see this full PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief. And I know at your public hearing, I did watch that prior to this meeting, just so that I could kind of get a feel for what was going on. Both chiefs have said that the public can contact you to tour the buildings themselves. So, members of the public should avail themselves of that opportunity to see the conditions and make an informed decision, because it isn't just dollars and cents. Obviously, it's how people are working, in what conditions, and, I happen to know that Mass General Law does actually give a presumption for cancer to firefighters, and that has been a long-standing Mass General Law. So it is something that has been acknowledged by the Commonwealth many, many years ago. Whether we've caught up with the science to hopefully prevent that, that would be great. So with that, if nobody else has anything else and the committee is good, we'll thank you again for staying and for all your hard work, and Happy New Year. Have a good night.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, next item up for discussion is, I do believe we've exhausted Board of Selectmen items, if I'm not mistaken. We are on...
There's just one, I think.
Gift acceptances, and actually we have an extra gift acceptance that came in that we will ask the board's indulgence to approve. So the police department, I can't seem to find anything in my packet today. We have a gift from Hilda Healy for $100 to buy some goodies. So that's, somebody's in a good mood for the new year. Is there a motion?
Motion to accept with gratitude.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? And nothing, so I guess everybody's in favor. All those opposed? It is a vote. We have one for the library that came in after our packet was delivered, from Subaru of Auburn, something to do with the National Ambassador Team Program for Advancement of Science Initiative, and they are donating the value of 4 new STEM books and to add to the children's book collection in the amount of $67. Is there a motion?
Motion to accept with gratitude.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, it is a vote. All right, now we are on to town manager items. We've taken care of 6A. We have 6B, Town of Auburn Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan. We do have a copy in our packet. Mrs.
You did.
Jacobson.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm very excited to bring this to you this evening, and as my cover memo has indicated, this has been a year-long process for the development of this plan. You heard some reference tonight from various speakers about the importance of having a plan in place and where do you go and needing appropriate facilities and resources and staffing. This plan takes all of those things into account. We used a boilerplate plan just to start from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and it initially started with Mark Moss, who was our emergency management director at the time, and then the board, if you recall, you made one of my goals for this past year, the development of this plan. So working with Lieutenant Moss, now we have, since April, Eric Otteson, former fire captain, is our emergency management director, and he's done a tremendous job. Also want to thank all the department heads. This was an effort which was a great goal for me to have from you, because through your direction, it enabled us to work with all the departments, including the school department, to pull this together. So this is another exciting read for you that's probably over 90 pages. It's also on the website, and it's also been filed on the state's web EOC, which is where all of the statewide municipalities can file a plan so everyone else in the state can see it. It's my understanding that around 20 communities have finalized their plan. So this is a major accomplishment for the town to get this done. It has not been completed in as many communities statewide. Certainly in this region, I believe we're the only community in such a mass area, if not for one other community, that just finished this plan. So I want to thank everyone for their involvement and the board for your direction for allowing us to complete it. So it is available online. Any questions, you can please direct them to me, or we can talk to our emergency management director, any of our chiefs. Everybody, like I said, everybody has been involved in this process. I will say that this is the type of document that should be a fluid document. It should be reviewed on a regular basis to make sure that nothing has changed as far as facilities or positions or any resources, allocation of resources. We should just make sure that we check this on a regular basis and make sure that we don't have to change anything, because in the case of a real serious emergency, or even in the case of a planned event, this is the blueprint that we're going to be using. So regardless of any of us being in our seats, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, this document always should be maintained for the town so the appropriate people will know what to do and how to do it. So we just want to thank you all.
Thank you. Board members have any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, thank you very much. Mrs. Goodrich?
Thank you. So, it's right in the title, comprehensive, but thank you for putting together this report. I mean, as you stated, it was one of your goals, but I don't think, even with something as simple as, a heat emergency, when we open up the shelters, the planning that has gone into this, it just doesn't happen like, an announcement of a heat wave, and all of a sudden we're opening the senior center. All of this has been planned for a long time, and certainly as one of your goals, we can put a check and say far exceeds on this one, but thank you for the work that you and those around you put into this.
Thank you.
Anything else? Well, thank you so much. I promise I didn't read it. I'm sorry, I didn't have time, but I will go through it. All right, next item, I think, and I apologize, Chief, if I had known that you were here, I would have taken this, I would have taken this earlier so that you could actually head home, but... Jacobson.
Oh, thank you. That's okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. So we do, again, we talked about the need for sanitization and making sure that you decontaminate things. So I want to turn to the chief to explain what this grant opportunity is and why it's so important for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So I'm asking for the board to allow me to apply for the FY19 washer extractor equipment gear program or grant program. There was a pool of money, I don't have the exact total offhand, but there was a pool of money that was allocated to the Department of Fire Services through the Fire Marshal's office to allow him to offer some mitigation money for departments that did not have gear extractors in order to launder their turnout gear. So first priority went to those departments that did not have any equipment. Then it was looking to do a replacement of a piece of equipment, and then there was a third option from a priority standpoint, from like a regionalization perspective. So I did not apply in the first round of grants. I did not ask to apply because in looking at the criteria, I did not think that we were going to be successful in an award based on the fact that we do have 2 gear extractors. One of them was just purchased and installed last year at Fire Headquarters, but the gear extractor at Station 2 is about 25 years old. I am seeking to replace that at some point. But believe it or not as many departments as expected applied for the grant, plus they got an additional appropriation, so they're actually doing a second round. So I'm not 100% sure whether or not, how high we're going to rank, but just knowing what we know with the second round, I think it's worth the effort to write the grant and put it in. It will give us mitigation money. It's up to $5,000, but essentially that'll be about 50% of the cost of the machine. The machine goes about $10,000. We spent, I think, $9,700 last year on ours. So Like I said, I don't know what our success rate is, but with the sort of the second swing at the bat with the new authorization, I'd like the opportunity to at least apply.
Board members have questions, comments?
Is that,
Mr. Bertha?
question, is that, as we watched the presentation, they talked about the police uniforms as well coming in and not needing well ventilation and things like that. This extraction machine, would it also be useful for police equipment, or is it just strictly for fire tank gear?
So that's a good question. So these gear extractors are designed to work at very high revolutions per minute, in some cases 10 to 20 times faster than what like your normal house washing machine would do. This equipment is specifically designed for washing contaminated turnout gear. So that would be the outer garments that we wear, sort of the heavy, what you would traditionally know as a firefighter suit. Because of the level and the amounts of carcinogen and, other cancer-causing agents that are on those, you typically, we do not even launder other types of regular station uniforms in there. They're strictly used for structural firefighting turnout gear to extract those particulates from the products of combustion out of them. So in the fire station, both fire stations, we have residential units. 100% of our members launder their clothing. No one leaves the fire station in their uniforms. Just not only from a contamination perspective of products of combustion, but just bloodborne pathogens and the other things that we face during the day. Members come in street clothes, they change into their uniforms, and then when they leave, they leave the station in street clothes. And their uniforms are either dry cleaned, which I would say a good percentage of the police uniforms are dry cleaned. Some of our members, I dry clean, but most of the firefighters who are on the floor, they do the laundry in the laundry facilities at the station, so those uniforms don't go home and cross-contaminate their home laundry, which then their children are using and those kind of things. So this equipment is strictly for structural firefighting gear.
Thank you. Do you have something?
No, I don't.
Okay. I just had one comment, just based on the presentation. Is there any way that we can improve how you're hanging your laundry after you've extracted it? I know that you have tight quarters. Is there anything that we can do as a community to assist in, at least so that you can hang it somewhere?
So that's another good question, and I appreciate that comment. Very recently, within the last week and a half, Brian Sheridan, this was his brainchild. He's the coordinator of the District 7 Regional Dive Team. He came up, I don't know if he had a vision in the middle of the night, but he came up with this sort of contraption that the DPW Facilities Division assisted us with last week on when you come into the back door of the fire station, so in those photos, like where those ladders were, where the gear was hanging off of, they mounted a board on the back, and it almost looks like that old thing that you used to use in gym where you needed the pegs to kind of climb it. So we have these really long pegs that, depending on how much equipment we slip those pegs in, and then we're able to hang rope, turnout gear, other types of suits. It's very unique. We probably own the only one, but we designed it sort of around the facility. So we have made some improvements on that just within the last week and a half.
Is there a motion?
I'll move to authorize the application of the washer extractor equipment grant program and to accept and expend the funds upon award.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, it is a vote.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Have a happy new year.
Congratulations to the manager tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we're on D, correct?
Correct.
So this is a vote to authorize the chairman to sign a letter of support for the application to Mass DHCD for low-income tax credits for the redevelopment of the Julia Bancroft School. We do have a written description here.
Yes, thank you, through the chair, to the members of the board. So, as you may recall, Penrose Properties was in here giving an update in the summer, and they were applying for tax credits, low-income tax credits for the Mary D. Stone School. They were invited to be in the round. The first round, presumably, we knew we weren't going to get funded. The second, I say we because it's a town building, but the project didn't get funded. The second round, we're waiting to find out from the state. That announcement should be made shortly. In anticipation of hopefully getting the credits for the Mary D., Penrose is preparing to go forward and now get the Julia Bancroft School in the pipeline. The state had recommended we do one school at a time. So in anticipation of putting an application in for the Julia Bancroft School, we're asking the board to support a letter from myself and the chairman to go to the state for the low-income housing tax credits. I will say they're also preparing to go for the historic tax credits for Julia Bancroft, which they already did get approved for Mary D. They are going for another round of tax credits for Mary D to get hopefully more money. And this board had already taken a vote for supporting a letter from the chair for the historic tax credits. That was not specific, or it was for both Mary D. and Julia Bancroft, so we don't need an additional vote for that, but we do need it for the low-income housing tax credits for Julia Bancroft.
Board members have any questions, comments, or concerns? If not, if there is a motion.
I'll make a motion to authorize the chairman to sign a letter of support for the application to Mass Department of Housing and Community Development for low-income tax credits for the redevelopment of the Julia Bancroft School.
Is there a second?
A second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those opposed? Hearing none, the vote is unanimous. All right, that extinguishes that part of the agenda. Do you have anything else, Mrs. Jacobson?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, we have minutes from November 25th and December 9th. Are there any corrections or omissions that board members came across? Hearing none, we will accept them as presented. Does any board member have anything before we adjourn?
I just want to say one more time, congratulations, Julie, and we're proud that you're here in the town of Auburn, and also happy to see that other people are recognizing your efforts, and you're deserving of all the accolades that you've gotten. So thank you again, and congratulations.
Thank you. Also want to thank the board. I didn't get a chance because we immediately broke for recess, but I really want to thank you for the reappointment this evening for another 3 years. Just look forward to it. We have a great team. We've got a lot on the agenda. We have a lot of things planned that we need to take on, so it's good for all of us to know that we can spend the next 3 years focusing on those long-term goals. So thank you so much for your support.
Say happy birthday, and I will say that I will make a motion to hire you if you show up on your birthday at the meeting. Ed is more than capable of covering for you, and you should be enjoying your evening, although tonight you wouldn't have been able to escape it,
That's right,
although we
that's
have
right.
another meeting, so. And I did want to thank the chair and Mrs. Goodrich for, I believe, managing this sneak attack, and I think it was a very welcome surprise.
Thank you.
It was. Thank you.
It is much appreciated, so.
And for the wonderful birthday wishes from all of you. And there are cupcakes. Cupcakes tomorrow. Thank you.
Hearing nothing, is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All those opposed? Hearing none, it's unanimous. We are adjourned. Good night.